Hello and welcome to Ecoholics. Today we are going to talk about a very important topic in almost all competitive exams of economics, which is called the ISLM curve. Today we are going to decipher this concept and we're going to understand the details about the ISLM curve. Without doing any further ado, let's understand this concept properly. Now let's first understand what exactly are these IS and LM curves. So first, when we talk about the IS curve, usually students think that okay, this talks about investment and savings, right? So this is an investment savings curve. Usually even students write this in examination, but actually it is incomplete information. IS curves shows the investment and savings in the economy, but it also showcases the goods market, okay, the equilibrium in goods market. So basically investment and savings and AD equals to AS. When that is mentioned, that's what is AD equals to AS means, the goods market equilibrium. So when the aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply, it is actually showcased by the IS curve, okay. Then we talk about the LM curve. Now what actually is LM curve? LM curve shows the equilibrium in the money market. Okay, equilibrium in the money market means that what is the liquidity preference of people? Simply, if you want to talk about liquidity preference, what can we say? We can say that how much cash people want to hold. How much cash do people want to hold? How much money do people want to hold? When we say how much they want to hold, it actually means that what is their liquidity preference, how easy they want their liquidity to be, and what are the characteristics of this liquidity. So we are going to talk in depth about these IS and LM curve, okay. Now each point on the IS LM graph represents a combination of what? Of interest rates and of income, where both of these pointers are important for both of these markets, whether we are talking about the money market or we are talking about the goods market, okay. So now if we look at the diagram, this is the combination of IS curve which showcases the goods market and the LM curve which showcases the money market. These two curves are actual equilibriums in their own strength, and now we equate or we put these two equilibriums in a further equilibrium where we say IS equals to LM. Now what is this equilibrium showing us? IS and LM curves are actually showcasing how much the firms want to produce and what is the liquidity preference of people, how much the people want to save, how much the people want to put their money in liquidity format, okay. So now this equilibrium is very, very important in macroeconomics. Why? Because here we are talking about money market and goods market both, okay. Now one of the important things that people forget, students forget, is that when we talk about ISLM curve, we are not talking about any long run growth path, okay. This concept was not given for any long run growth path to understand the long run equilibrium. It is indeed the concept of short run equilibrium, the short run growth of the economy and the short run money market and goods market understanding, okay. So here we have the basic concept of ISLM. Now let's move forward and also understand what happens in both of these markets. So the general equilibrium that we talk about of IS and LM, here we have when both markets are in equilibrium, we find the IS-LM intersection point, which determines what? The equilibrium rate of interest, which we usually utilize in macroeconomics and even growth and development module, that there is one there is one common interest rate. Now many students say, ma'am, what is this interest rate? Is this the bank interest rate, or it is our FD interest rate, or it is the saving deposit interest rate? No, it is the equilibrium rate of interest that we are talking about, okay, and which is why it is widely utilized as a concept in macroeconomics and in growth and development module and general economics also, right? And we also talk about the equilibrium level of output as well. Now, if I say, what is this IS curve? What does this IS curve show? This IS curve is actually showcasing the leakages are equal to injections. You all must have learned the basic circular flow of income in which we talk about leakages and injections. Okay, so when we say leakages, what are we talking about? We are talking about savings, we are talking about imports, and we are talking about taxes, right? Taxes can also be written as government revenue, right? So that I can correlate it with the RHS part. Now, what is investment? What are injections? Okay, so if I write it here, injections. What are the injections to an economy? Injections are investment plus government spending, okay, in contrast to government revenue. Government spending and contrast of imports is exports, okay. So please make a note of it that this IS curve is actually showcasing the equilibrium or the circular flow of an economy where we have leakages are equal to injections, okay. So if injections are more in the economy, the IS curve is going to shift to the right. So this is how we interpret the IS and LM curves, okay. This is the backbone of Keynesian short-run macroeconomics, okay. Now, let's talk about the policy mix and the shifts that happen, okay. Now, I have already mentioned to you what happens when the IS curve shifts right. When does the IS curve shifts right? When we have the government spending, when we have the investments, and when we have exports. That is the time when the IS curve is going to shift to the right, okay. It is also called fiscal expansion. Now you understand why it's called fiscal expansion. From this concept itself, you can understand why it's called as fiscal expansion, okay. Then what happens when there is monetary expansion? Now you all know how monetary expansion happens. Yes, monetary expansion will be happening from the purview of the central bank of any economy, right? So now whenever the monetary expansion will happen, there will be supply of money, correct? Maybe the central bank of the economy is printing more currency, okay, or maybe it is floating more currency in the economy. So supply of money is increasing when there is monetary expansion. Now what happens when there is fiscal expansion? Along with the IS curve shifting to the right, both it is going to increase the rate of interest and income. While and we talk about monetary expansion, it talks about the LM curve shifting towards the right. It is going to lower the rate of interest and increase the income. Why it is lowering the rate of interest? Money supply has increased in the market, okay. So it means that the the economy and the central bank of the economy is actually trying to provide money so that it can be spent by the investors, by people, by consumers, right, and which is why the rates are lowered, right. So this policy mix is very, very crucial for learning, for attempting any competitive examination, okay. Here you can see how fiscal expansion and monetary expansion takes place. Now I will tell you a very simple thing here. there's always a question in your exams that what happens when is the fiscal policy incompetitive and when is the monetary policy incompetitive. Okay, so I'll give you a clear idea of that as well. Okay, you remember this principle and you will never forget it. Okay, we will talk about the monetary policy okay, monetary policy will be effective when the LM curve is vertical, and the IS curve is horizontal. Okay, now of course this is a very ideal condition, okay, but I'm talking about the elasticity of these curves. Okay, so when the IS curve is horizontal and the LM curve is vertical, now what does LM curve vertical means? That there is no speculative demand. When we talk about the LM curve, the LM curve actually talks about two types of motives that money supply has, which also Keynes had mentioned. The two types of motives that money supply has is the transaction motive and the speculative motive. Okay, these are the two types of very important motives that LM curve would have. Now, when the LM curve is vertical, it means that it does not have any speculative motive. There is only transaction motive. Okay, now because of this, the monetary policy is going to work in these conditions. Okay, but vis-a-vis, if we say that we are talking about fiscal policy being effective, okay, when will the fiscal policy be effective? When we have the horizontal LM curve, okay, and vertical IS curve. Okay, what does horizontal LM curve mean? That it is least interest sensitive. LM curve is not interest sensitive. It has lost all its sensitivity. The horizontal LM curve also showcases the concept of liquidity trap that Keynes had stated. Now, what happens in liquidity trap? Even if the central bank of the economy lowers the interest rates, the people are not really interested in putting their money in the banks. Now what will happen? They will prefer liquidity. They will prefer to hold the cash. Even when the central bank will print more money to circulate in the economy, they are going to hoard the cash. Hoard the cash. They will not put it in the system. The circular flow of income will be broken. Okay, so this happens when there is a liquidity trap. That's why it's called a liquidity trap, because people are holding cash and hoarding cash. Okay, now in such a situation, monetary policy has done all it could do and it's not working. So then what should work? The fiscal policy will work. So you should remember that when you learn the concept, don't think that okay, fiscal policy will work when the LM curve is horizontal and the IS curve is vertical. Don't rote learn it. Instead, learn it by logic, and learning by logic will make you remember things for longer duration of time, right? You'll not forget it also. So fiscal policy works when the IS curve is vertical and LM curve is horizontal. These are the most ideal conditions. You know that IS and LM curve would not be completely horizontal or vertical at any point of time. But we are talking about the elasticity, the tendency of that curve. Okay, so when it will be more towards the horizontal and more towards the vertical path, at that time one of the policies is going to work. Correct? So that's the effectiveness of the policy mix. Okay, now let's talk about a few criticisms. Now, initially only I told you all that this model is a short run model. Okay, so IS curve and LM curve, this equilibrium mix works when the economies work in a short run, and it's a closed economy. ISLM is not for an open economy. Okay, it's for a closed economy, right? If we open the economy, then we also have the concept of ISLM BP, which talks about the balance of payments. Okay, so the short run and closed economy are one of the prime features, the characteristics of ISLM curve. Okay, also it ignores expectations and price flexibility, which was later solved by the balance of payments concept that also got integrated, okay, with this particular concept. But why do we learn it? Because it's a very foundational macroeconomics principle. You will always have questions related to what happens when the IS curve is horizontal, when it is vertical, when LM curve is horizontal, when LM curve is vertical. Okay, so you should always remember what would happen, what will be the interest elasticity for each of these curves. Okay, this was one of the basic concepts that we talked about under ISLM. I will have a more detailed video on this where we will talk about what are the technicalities of IS and LM curve in my future videos, and I will also talk about how the balance of payment concept is integrated with ISLM. Till then, stay tuned to Ecoholics.